So this man really influenced me. Of course, I've never met him, but really influenced me as far as when I started thinking about doing something like this, as far as a YouTube channel. And it was in the middle of the Biden administration when things were really hitting hard, as far as people being canceled. Um, the whole transgender issue was just raging out of control. We had just gotten through the Summer of Love and George Floyd and all that kind of stuff, but we were still all under the Biden administration, and this happened. So I'm just gonna read you what I looked up here. Imagine you're a young surgeon, fresh out of residency, walking the halls of one of America's top children's hospitals, when you stumble upon a secret that shakes you to the core. A program continuing controversial gender affirming treatment on minors, even after the hospital publicly announced it had stopped. That is the chilling reality Dr. Eithan Haim faced at Texas Children's Hospital in Houston. And what he did next not only sparked a national firestorm, but nearly cost him everything. As a general surgeon, now practicing in Greenville, Texas, Heim graduated from Florida Atlantic University's medical school and completed his residency at Baylor College of Medicine, where he specialized in trauma and general surgery. But in 2023, during his time at the hospital, he uncovered evidence that Texas Children's was still providing puberty blockers, hormones, and surgeries to children struggling with gender identity, despite a March 2022 statement claiming they'd paused such care amid scrutiny from Texas officials who deemed it potential child abuse. Believing these practices amounted to harm, Haim anonymously leaked redacted documents with no patient names or identifying details to conservative journalist Christopher Rufo, who published a bombshell story exposing the program. The fallout was swift and brutal. Just a month later, federal agents from the Department of Health and Human Services were knocking on his door, informing him that he was the target of a criminal investigation. By May of 2024, under the Biden administration's Justice Department, Haim was indicted on 4 felony counts of HIPAA violations, accused of improperly accessing and sharing patient information with intent to cause malicious harm to the hospital. Facing up to 10 years in prison and a $250,000 fine, Haim pleaded not guilty, insisting he'd done nothing wrong and had only sought to protect vulnerable kids from what he saw as experimental and irreversible procedures. Critics included some media outlets and affected families viewed his actions differently, as a dangerous breach of privacy that outed transgender youth and fueled anti trans activism, leading to a September 2025 lawsuit by one child's family against Baylor College of Medicine for the leak. Yet supporters hailed him as a hero, pointing to emerging stories from detransitioners who regret their treatments and argue the medical community rushed them into life altering decisions without full informed consent. The case took a dramatic turn in January of 2025, shortly after President Trump's inauguration, when federal prosecutors dropped all charges with prejudice, meaning they couldn't be refiled. A move some attributed to shifting political winds and others to lack of evidence, as no proof emerged that Haim had disclosed identifiable patient data or profited from it. But the ordeal wasn't over. Haim testified before a House Judiciary subcommittee in April of 2025, detailing what he called lawfare against the whistleblowers, alongside nurse Vanessa Sivage, another insider who corroborated the hospital's secret continuation of the program. Now, in a bold counterstrike announced on January 29th of 2026, Haim is suing Texas Children's Hospital for malicious prosecution, alleging hospital executives and colleagues fed false information to prosecutors, including lies about his access to records and motives, all to retaliate for his exposure. The suit claims key figures like the hospital's general counsel and a top surgeon met with federal agents days before they targeted Haim, and even details a coworker posting anonymous defamatory reviews online accusing him of misconduct. Actions Haim says devastated his career, drained his savings, and brought death threats to his family. Backed by attorney Marcel Burke and funded in part by Elon Musk, Haim's fight highlights a deeper clash over transgender youth care. On one side, advocates who see gender affirming treatments as life saving and essential, backed by medical organizations like the American Medical Association, which isn't true anymore, it doesn't sound like. And on the other, skeptics like Haim, who argue they're often unnecessary and harmful, especially for minors. Substantiated by growing lawsuits from detransitioners and international reviews questioning the evidence base. As Haim rebuilds his life in a small town practice, focusing on trauma surgery, his story raises tough questions about medical ethics, whistleblower protections, and where we draw the line between care and experimentation. Questions that continue to divide experts, lawmakers, and families across the nation. So I remember specifically hearing about his case and thinking there's no way. Thinking that he had done the right thing, that he caught them, and everybody was going to tout him as a hero, that he caught this huge Texas Children's, huge institution in continuing to do these procedures when they said that they weren't going to, and that Texas was actually after them and saying that they thought it was near child abuse. And then to hear he was a resident when he found this out. When he was approached by those agents, it was the day that he was graduating from residency. You think that's a coincidence? Absolutely not. They weaponized the DOJ against him. And I mean, if Biden, won again, of course he didn't run, but if Biden won again or if Harris had won, who knows? They would have still pushed this, I'm sure, because God knows where the whole country would have been at this point. But he stuck his neck out. If you don't know about becoming a surgeon or a physician, it's 4 years of college, pre-med type college. And then you have to get into a medical school. And then it's 4 years of medical school. And then it's 4 years of residency. So you're talking 12 years after high school to just get to that point. And you have to take your boards a couple of times in there too. And so to be right at that point where he's about to, graduate from residency and then he'll sit for his boards, and to say, I can't look the other way. This is the right thing to do. It was a tough time. We all were going through, again, we were dealing with all the things that we had to deal with the Biden administration, and then to see a guy like this go through that and be optimistic about it. He did it. However they caught him, I guess they probably ran the records and saw who had looked up the records and figured out that. He tried to do it anonymously. He didn't actually disclose any patient information. They said in the he kind of laughed. He's got a great sense of humor. He laughed in the indictment. They actually put a couple of the initials for the patients whose information he had used, And so he said, well, they're disclosing more patient information than I did because I disclosed no part of their name or date of birth or any identifying information, just the fact that they were, some of these kids were 11 or 12 years old, and what they were having done, which was, I think, mostly puberty blockers. But that institution did everything, it sounds like. They did transgender surgery, sex reassignment surgery, whatever term you want to use. They say gender affirming care, which is such BS. We all know now. We all knew it then, but um, that they were pushing that so hard. And for him to be that strong, it was one of those moments when I was again in just down because things were crappy, being in law enforcement and dealing with the Biden administration, hoping, you know, hoping that things were going to change, and knowing that I had to do something else, and being a cop, I've always kind of, and I've said this in other videos, I've always kind of held my tongue, not around other cops and my family and stuff like that, but like I always towed the line of just being fairly politically correct, not going out there too much as far as letting my, keeping my hand close to the vest. And I realized that I can't do that anymore. Like that's not, as a, as a cop, as a um, man, as an American, and specifically as a father, I have to say and do what's right. And saying and doing what's right is sometimes hard and is sometimes risky. And so, if you follow my channel at all, things like me, one of the first things I did was document that the fall of Minneapolis was a propaganda film, that they lied, that they changed, that they edited it um, to make it look like Katie Blackwell, who's now second in command of the Minneapolis Police Department, said something on the stand that she didn't say, or changed the way it looked like she was responding to a question, and all to prop up Derek Chauvin, like this POS cop who ran us all through the ringer. I mean, 2020 kicked off with that incident, and now you're propping this guy up who's a terrible cop and trying to defend him. And I'm not going to defend the whole system because, yeah, the whole system is the court case against him. There's plenty to talk about there. But when you say that what he did was justified and was how it was taught, when you, um, Liz Collin and Dr. J.C. Shea, Liz is a journalist. Her husband, Bob Kroll, was a cop for 30 years, and Bob Kroll is on record saying that what Derek Chauvin did was not justified. And yet somehow Liz Collin gets together with J.C. Shea, Dr. J.C. Shea, and they put this book together and they put this film together. And Bob Grohl has to kind of go along with it. Can you imagine how crazy that relationship is, to like see your wife talking about this, like how Chauvin was wronged and everything that he did was right and how it was taught and trained? Bob Kroll is sitting back saying, that's not how we did that. So why does he go along with it? And I can't do that. I've never been able to do that. Sometimes I would just hold my tongue, but now I'm done holding my tongue, and now I'm telling it how it is. And it's not party line. It's not the thin blue line, you know, the blue wall is silent. None of that. None of that. If it's a cop making a split second decision and it maybe was iffy, then yeah, absolutely, I give it to the cop. And I support I am in law enforcement. I support law enforcement 100%. But if there are egregious failures, then those need to be dealt with and rectified and talked about and discussed and and said that they are egregious failures. We don't cover them up. We don't try and find the loopholes. Liz Collin did another interview with a crappy cop up north who tried to take a whole bunch of money from a vulnerable adult or the estate of a vulnerable adult. And again, tried to prop her up. And for what? I don't know. Like, we in law enforcement, we, the good cops, want those people dealt with, weeded out, and gone. We don't want that. I even saw Walter Hudson, great guy, representative for the state of Minnesota. He did an interview with a left-leaning wingnut the other day, and you should see it. I can't remember the guy's name. You should you should watch the interview because this guy is like a squirrel on crack, man. He's he's like talking to a defense attorney. It's like being on the stand when a defense attorney is trying to get you cornered in something, where Walter would say something and then he would hammer with another question and talk over him and then hammer with another question and try to just get him pinned in the corner. And Walter was wrong. He talked about the George Floyd, and he was wrong about the death. And this guy was wrong about the way the case was laid out as well. He said Dr. Michael Baden, I believe that Dr. Michael Baden is the way you pronounce his last name, that he did the autopsy. Well, he did a separate independent autopsy, but he wasn't the official. He hasn't been in the public sector for like 40 years. So he does only private autopsies for the rich and famous and cases like George Floyd, where he's going to get a lot of notoriety. So that guy was wrong too, but I'll say it, like, Walter Hudson was wrong, and he didn't know the facts, or what we all get stuck and we watch it all the time is we want to toe the party line. Like, I agree with the Republicans. I lean right. I'm pro, I'm pro ICE. I'm pro the closed border. I'm pro law enforcement. And so when somebody brings up a case that's bad, that looks bad for people that you support, like law enforcement, we tend to want to somehow either deflect or justify what happened, when in reality there's no justification. I mean, there's no justification in what happened to George Floyd. Now again, like, there's so much to it. He could have died later on because of the level of fentanyl in his system. That's true. But because of the actions of Derek Chauvin, we'll never know. But you have to call it out and say what he did, the use of force, was not justified. And I'm not gonna do that. That's not who I am. And so, although what Dr. Haim did was way beyond anything that I've done so far, as what I've articulated on here, the videos that I've made that have been bad cops, specific bad cops that I've called out, and I've called out the journalism of Alpha News, for that matter. And Alpha News isn't bad. Like on a whole, they've got a lot of journalists that seem to do a really good job. For whatever reason, Liz Collin is stuck in this victim mentality. Oh, woe is me. I saw her on a podcast with a local podcaster from the Twin Cities, and she's belly aching about how her documentary, The Fall of Minneapolis, didn't get enough airtime, and certain places wouldn't play it. And of course, the thing's been seen 10, 15 million times. It got plenty of airtime. Unfortunately, it got too much airtime. I honestly think that what Walter Hudson was talking about the other day, he actually got from The Fall of Minneapolis. Um, and so I I have to. This is like I can't. That's who I am. So I'm the type of person that I want as a politician. I'm not running for any sort of office, but that's what I wish we had. Like if you look at independent journalists or podcasters, content creators, like Tim Pool, I think he says it like he thinks it is. He and he's pro Trump when Trump does good things, and when Trump doesn't do or makes poor decisions, he calls him out and says, "I don't think that that's what we should be doing." And that's where I'm at. Like there's lots of things that Trump is doing that I love. I don't like a lot of his rhetoric, but that's who he is. So it's like, well, well, we got to take. I mean, I want everything positive about Trump, so I'm good with that. The fact that you have to deal with some rhetoric that's a little bit, cringy sometimes. Okay, like that's how it goes. And yeah, like absolutely, like Tim Pool. I love listening to him. Um, he calls himself a Democrat, I think, or used to be a Democrat. He's not as far right as people think, and it shows if you listen to a lot of what he talks about. He's not 100% pro Trump, for example, and neither am I. Not everything that he does. I'll tell you what, he does a lot of stuff that sounds crazy at the time, and then it turns out. So, and the other things that I really need to talk about that I haven't talked about. Um, Unfortunately, I was sick for like a week when all this crazy stuff. Renee Good, Alex Preddy. I think Renee Good, it was justified. I'll just say that. Like, I think it's pretty clear cut that it's justified. Identifiable threat coming at you, deadly use of force. I get somebody who hasn't ever been in a situation like that. I've never been in a shooting, but even just a high stress situation, or the fact that like one bullet doesn't do it, you have to fire more, even though it seems like overuse. You have to, and you're in the heat of the moment, and you don't know when you're going to stop the threat until the threat is stopped, and that's often probably a couple of rounds after. Or you probably shoot a couple more times before you can kind of identify that that's happened, so I get that seems like overkill, but I think it was very clear cut. Now, I didn't like the fact that they didn't allow the BCA, to do any sort of investigation, that they shut him out from that. Can I see why they did it? Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely understand that because Governor Walz is such a disaster, because Mayor Fry is such a disaster, that you can be concerned that things are going to be skewed. There's going to be political pressure. So I understand that part. I know a lot of guys, I know the BCA, they just do a good job. So I don't think that there would be any, the facts are the facts, the measurements are the measurements, all that kind of stuff. So I wish that they had allowed that to happen because that looks really bad. And again, I understand why, because Governor Walz calls law enforcement, you know, all the terrible things that he calls us. And so you can be concerned. Yeah, if I was somebody in a justified shooting, let's say, I would still be very concerned because of the political climate. They're not very good at that. There was a time back when the police chief would get up in front of the media and say, we have to complete an investigation. Okay? And just here are the facts. There was a shooting, somebody is dead, a police officer shot. The police officer's on leave, all the standard things, but that's it. But in that case, the U.S. government came out and called her a domestic terrorist and said that almost immediately, and then Mayor Fry got up and said that the claim of self-defense was BS right away, within hours. And so if you're on the left, you say, well, Kristi Noem and President Trump said that it was justified and she was a terrorist. And that's not right. But us on the right and in law enforcement say, yeah, but Mayor Fry got up and said that he knows for certain that the claim of self-defense is BS, is complete BS. And that's the political climate we have to deal with in Minnesota, unfortunately. And hopefully there's a change, right? We have to work towards a change. And hopefully we can get a Republican in. I mean, look at how good everything is, and we're going to get voter ID in and all that kind of stuff. And so that's all good. But again, I have to call it like it is. I didn't like it when the government came forward and called her a domestic terrorist. How do you know that? Yeah, she drove at him. It didn't look like it was intentional. Like at the time, it was she did it. And drove right at him, but it didn't look like she woke up that morning and decided that she was going to try and run somebody over. He didn't look like he put himself in a bad position. He, from my mind, thought that she wasn't going to drive away. They were going to have to work towards getting her out of the vehicle. And then all of a sudden she put it in drive and he's standing right there. So, but I think it was justified. And then you look at Alex Preddy. And I haven't watched all the different angles of that, but I've heard descriptions from people like Tim Pool who have. And I think that's a very different situation. And I think they have realized that, the feds have, because they're taking it more seriously. I think those guys are on leave. He came in with a gun. He had a gun on his hip, and that was the stupidest thing he could have possibly done. And then he got wrapped up with law enforcement. And yes, I understand that, like, it kind of looks like, or it does look like he was there just to help at this point when he was confronted by law enforcement to help somebody up. Then he gets engaged with law enforcement. He doesn't back down. Of course, he actively engages with them. He has a firearm on his hip. It looks like somebody disarmed him, but then there was the call for gun. Now, all I know is that when you're in a situation like that and somebody says gun, you have to identify what it is, who has the gun, and who is the threat. I think that they even said that maybe that gun discharged, into the pavement. But again, you have to identify. There's a whole bunch of people there. There could be other people around you with guns, and somebody might be saying that somebody behind you has a gun. So you don't get to just willy-nilly fire at who you think maybe was who they were talking about. So I think that one's going to be very different. Now, it still may come out as in the heat of the moment, they saw the gun, even though it was a cop who had secured, had disarmed him, taken the weapon, and then it went off. I don't know. That one's a mess. But again, there were some reports that they claimed right away that Petty had shown up there with intent to do mass damage to law enforcement, and obviously that wasn't true. He was there to engage law enforcement. He had engaged law enforcement 10 days before, where he kicked out a light and swore at him and spit at him and stuff like that. And so yeah, I mean, that one's not clear cut in my mind. I think the other one is. I think the Renee Good shooting is going to be considered justified. But my point is that why I'm doing this channel at all is that it is my analysis of things. I have a law enforcement perspective. I have the perspective of a father. But at the end of the day, I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to be honest. That things aren't always positive for the, side that I support. And I'll tell you that. It's uncomfortable. It sucks. I don't like to admit. I wish things were clear cut, Katie Blackwell, I supported her. And I mean, I still don't think she lied on the stand. But now the reports that we're getting is that she's telling her guys, her officers, to back off and to not help ICE. I'm not talking about helping them with immigration enforcement. I'm talking about helping them when they're getting assaulted. And she's getting on the radio and calling them off, like, you will not assist. And that sucks. If she is in fact doing that, it sounds like those are reports that people from Minneapolis are saying. And that sucks. And so I can say, if that's the leader that she is right now, then I'm not for it. Then I don't support them. I have not been happy with Brian O'Hara. I have not been happy with Mayor Fry. It's pretty negative towards law enforcement, negative towards the citizens of their city. You can't control anything. I mean, Mayor Fry was the mayor back in 2020 when everything went crazy. Governor Walz was the governor too. So, but Dr. Eithan Haim, what an inspiration. What an absolute inspiration. So, I wanted to show this to you. So he was charged, I think I said in March, May of 2024. May 2024, 4 felonies. They finally dropped the charges in January of 2025. Uh, Here it is. There it was. Here's him on X posting it January 24th, 2025. You can see 24 CR 29 or 298. That's the case number. So, yeah, middle of 2024 is when the case was filed. And here's January 24th, 2025. And it was dismissed with prejudice, which means they cannot refile these charges. But can you imagine 6, 7, 8 months waiting? And they said he was looking at 10 years. Talk about, talk about an election meaning something for you personally. He was looking at 10 years for blowing the whistle on the fact that Texas Children's was still mutilating little kids. And he blew the whistle on that. And he was looking at 10 years and like a $250,000 fine. Look at this. This I thought was great. So just January 21st, again, this is his Facebook page. Elon Musk funds suit against Texas Children's for malicious prosecution against Eithan Haim. But the cost, what he would have paid for doing what he knew was right, imagine that. You're just starting out your career. He's married. I think he had a infant daughter at the time, or had a daughter in the middle of waiting to see if it was going to go through. And you've just gone through 12 years of training to become a surgeon, and people around you know that this is wrong, and they're doing it anyway because they know that a place like Texas Children's is going to bury you. And he did it anyway. So in all of this, when I was watching and waiting for something to happen, for Trump to get elected again, and just, the quandary of being in law enforcement during the Biden administration, and then to see this guy get just run through the ringer and think that, oh my God, he's a hero. He's a whistleblower. He's coming at them. He's taking it to the big institution that continues to mutilate children. And why do they mutilate children? Why do they do these surgeries? Why do they do what they quote unquote call gender affirming care? Do they care? No. They get paid a shitload of money. They make so much money on the medications, on the surgeries, on the aftercare, on the mental health side of it. Like, you've got a disaster of a person who just likely needed mental health help as a little kid, 11, 12. And they did it for money. They billed, and they made millions of dollars. And that's what they're a for-profit. And even if they say they're a not-for-profit, they use that money in ways that nonprofits, not-for-profits can do. But they make millions of dollars off of these kids' pain and suffering and mental health. And he stepped forward. And he was a big He's somebody that I thought of when I was thinking, do I really make a video about the fall of Minneapolis where I call out the fact that what Derek Chauvin did was wrong and do it publicly, do it on the internet where however many people can see it? Do I do that? Yes, I do it because it's the right thing to do. Just like Dr. Haim did what was the right thing to do. And stay tuned because last time I saw Dr. J.C. Shea, he was wearing like a freaking scarf. I don't know if he was at their holiday party or something. I don't know if Liz has interviewed him in a while. She used to interview him, and those were awkward as hell. But there's more to come. There's more information about that guy that I will release at some point. There was more behind that. The making of the fall of Minneapolis than just they thought that Derek Chauvin was railroaded and tweaked that and edited that film to make it look as bad as possible. And then to throw people under the bus. I mean, there were other Minneapolis cops who testified and said that what he did wasn't justified. And they called, Liz Collin, J.C. Shea, the fall of Minneapolis, Alpha News. They called them out too and claimed that they didn't know the use of force. They didn't know the Minneapolis use of force policy. Bob Kroll did know, and he said what Derek Chauvin didn't do or did was not justified, was not a justified use of force. And yet his wife, Liz Collin, made the fall of Minneapolis. And now Bob Kroll sits back and does these interviews with him, with Liz. But anyway, more to come on JC Shea for sure. But this is why I do this. This is why I had to do this. I had to start this channel, was to be honest and to tell the truth about this kind of stuff. I hate it when somebody I looked up to, like Walter Hudson, says something that's wrong. And whether he knew it was wrong and said it anyway, or if he was confused, I don't know. But he said some things that were wrong. And I have to clarify that, correct that, even though I'm on his side. I mean, he's a Republican, he's on the right. Everything else I've heard him say, I agree with. He was wrong in that situation. And I think it's because everybody wants to toe their party line. And I wish more politicians would be able to do this. But everybody's so divided. The left just goes down the rabbit hole of the crazy far left. And nobody can change that. Nobody can go against that. There's legislation that has been put out recently. Things like, just simple things like, if an illegal alien in Minnesota was found to have committed a violent crime, can we all agree that that person should be deported? And the Democrats shut that down. Voter ID, the Democrats are trying to shut that down. Why? We all speculate that they think that they get most of the illegal alien vote. And if they don't, and come on, election integrity, for years, the Democrats laughed at the Republicans when the Republicans said that elections aren't secure. We know that the voting rolls are not true. There's dead people, there's illegal aliens in there, there's people who vote more than once, and we got laughed at. And now it's coming out all over the United States that it's happening, that it has happened. Minnesota, we allowed illegal aliens to get licenses. Why? I don't know, the goodness of Governor Walz's heart and the Democrats, right? No, because once you get a driver's license, you automatically get entered into the voting rolls. And so now you're eligible to vote and then you can show your driver's license and you can go vote. That's why. So we're going to push that through, the SAVE Act. That's the last thing. I'm proud of that. I think we're actually going to get that done, and I think we are going to get that done pretty soon. So anyway, check him out, Dr. Eithan Haim. He was on Jordan Peterson's podcast, talked about this whole thing. He's posted a bunch of stuff on X. He's been on some other news organizations very recently. He's talking about, again, he's still talking about transgender stuff. There's a study that he just posted recently and talked about how the study was flawed because the number of, the sample size, or trial size or whatever is so small, and the error in that. So check him out. He does great work, and thank God he made it through. And now they're going to sue Texas Children's for malicious prosecution. So anyway, that's all I've got for today. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the fact that I'm getting some people to comment, talk about the videos that I've put out so far. If you see this and like it, please subscribe. I greatly appreciate it. Steve Loomis with Walking the Mile.